So let's get started a little bit. I appreciate your saying that about culture. Fabiola's from Mexico, Barbara's from Argentina, Lisa's from Mesquite, um, Texas. So I appreciate your saying that because conversations and how we talk and flow is culturally influenced. Um, and I think that we want to include that in any kind of you know webinar or Facebook Live that we're having about how to have conversations. And I do think that while, as a Jewish person, that while interrupting and sidetracking in conversation shows that we're engaged and we're interested, and that's part of our culture, that we respect each other. I think that in a way conversations interrupting does have some real limitations that I'd like to talk about, because I think that when we interrupt people, it sends a message that we might not be aware of, regardless of what your culture is. Hey, Mark. Um, so let's talk for a minute. Conversations can be tough for a lot of folks with ADHD. Tracking the flow, staying focused on a subject, talking about a topic that may seem relevant and related to whatever's being discussed, but tangential to other people who are part of the conversation. Then there's the volume and the tone of your voice, reading facial expressions, perhaps difficulty gauging physical proximity. How close do I stand? How far away? Or what happens to a lot of people with ADHD, being overly critical in your mind of what you are or are not doing that you think you should be. And perhaps you're worrying about what someone is thinking about you rather than being present with what's actually going on. So interruptions for people with ADHD frequently reflect weaker verbal impulse control, but also issues with working memory and metacognition. You may not remember to wait your turn because you don't trust yourself to recall what you want to say later when there's a pause in the conversation or the other person has finished talking. You may be afraid of this forgetting. You may also be unaware that you're interrupting until someone lets you know. You may feel that you need to prove yourself and establish your expertise. You may really want to engage in this conversation, but you can't find a way in, so you interrupt. You may be very excited about this topic and eager to discuss it. Now, the urge to interrupt is also affected by anxiety, particularly social anxiety. The more anxious you feel in a social situation, the higher the likelihood is that you will interrupt. Anxiety will exacerbate any nervousness or worries about acceptance, performance, or embarrassment. So when you're flooded with anxiety or with these intense feelings, being worried about, will I be liked? Will I say what I mean? Will people basically judge me? You might want to be kinder to yourself, I guess is what I want to say, because you can naturally be more impulsive as a protective measure and less capable of monitoring your words or actions. That's part of what happens when anxiety and ADHD are sort of intertwined, which is very, very common. Um, so let's take a moment right now and reflect on how you feel when someone interrupts you. It seems like they maybe aren't listening, but rather they're waiting for their turn to talk. And the interrupter is demonstrating that their thoughts are more important than yours. How does that make you feel? Please put in the chat how you feel when someone interrupts you. Are you angry? Do you feel sort of dismissed? Do you feel unseen? Even though interrupting may demonstrate a lack of impulse control on your part, other people may not understand this and become irritated or impatient because they believe that what you're asserting is that your thoughts are more important than theirs. They probably feel like you do when you're interrupted. So thank you, Amanda, for starting this conversation. You say, I want to look at the chat here. You say you feel not heard. Shannon, you feel annoyed. Mark, you're okay with it. Julie, you get exasperated, devalued, disrespected. That's right. So these are some intense feelings. I also am going to go back a minute and say I'm often all of these. Fabiola says, I'm always afraid that I'm going to forget what I want to say. I lose my train of thought easily, but later feel ashamed that I interrupted and I wasn't listening to the other person. I'm going to give you some tips on how to do that. Jackie says, I'm terrible at doing this. Samira, I always forget the answer, so I rush to interrupt them. Right. So one of the problems is that we're worried about forgetting. You get annoyed. And then there's also how we feel when other people interrupt us, disrespected, annoyed, um, kind of used to it. Jameson says, unless they won't ever let me chime back in, then I get irritated. Rana says, constant interrupters make me feel like what they have to say is more important than mine. Carol, I feel insignificant. Adele, in Zoom, I get muted often because of this. Ouch. Teresa says it's situational. Marissa says she's frustrated. Danielle says, I feel hurt. I've learned to ignore people when they interrupt me. I literally turn away. That's a very powerful signal. Michelle says, if they say something like, oh, I've done that too, I'm not bothered at all. But if they just roll over me, I think it's quite rude. Interesting. Lauren, I feel like I'm making others feel this way, but I don't mind it. I feel like it is a flow. Okay. And I'm not listened to as if my view is not worth listening. So that sense of feeling small, of feeling like what you have to say doesn't matter, um, when you are interrupted, is something we want to pay attention to, because whether or not we're talking to someone who has ADHD, um, when we interrupt them, they probably feel the way that you're expressing you feel now in the chat. And even though when you have ADHD, it's much harder to regulate your verbal impulse control and to depend on your working memory and to access the metacognition, the self-awareness of what it is that you're doing in a conversation with people where they may not know that you have ADHD. They don't know any of those things. All they see is the behavior and they're responding to the behavior. Terry says, I'm irritated if interrupted, but when I do it to my kids, they feel hurt. Melanie says, it depends on the conversation and who I'm speaking with. Sometimes it can be a sign of excitement or enthusiasm, right? Other times it's frustrating. That's true. I think that you can be, really passionate or enthusiastic about a topic. And so you're going, you're just participating and giving your opinion and going, and they're going, and it's a beautiful loud music. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. You could be really enthusiastic and they may feel that your enthusiasm is kind of stepping on their toes a little bit. Mark says, I'd rather someone interrupt me than be late to a meeting. Okay. Invisible, independent of my mood, Samira. Trisha Ann, I was raised never to interrupt an adult. As a non-ADHD parent, it's a struggle when we are out in public and my kids interrupt me or another adult. Part of it is my own embarrassment that people are looking at me for not teaching my children manners. Right. So then we kind of get into this, sort of secondary observation position where we're judging ourselves based on what we think other people are doing. Karen, depends on the content for me if I'm interrupted. Adele, all of these feelings you mentioned are probably what they think. Same here, Fabiola. Thank you, Megan. Joni, I'm overly critical with myself. It's been difficult for the last 4 months because I've been really sick. I need to get things done, but it's been hard and sometimes impossible. Today I got upset about the soup my husband brought because it's not the one I like. I'm still sick, and the last thing I want to do is cook. I had to take this step back, apologize to him, and think. I solved my problems by ordering some food, so my needs are still taken care of. Sometimes I feel like there's only one solution to the problem, but that's not true. No, it rarely is one solution to a problem. There's often many solutions. These are such great comments. Thank you. And I'm sorry that you've been sick, Joni, for so long. That sounds really hard. Michelle, I worry about losing my thought. I feel like I need a notebook. Ah, Michelle, you're 3 steps ahead of me because I'm going to be talking about that in a few minutes. Adele, I need to remember these things when I interrupt. Cassandra, this is something I've worked on my entire life. I'm always apologizing for interrupting. Maria Elena, I don't like being interrupted because then I forget what I was about to say. That's true for actually most people. It's when you receive an interruption, when there's an interrupter who's sort of intruding on your conversation, the likelihood that you're going to remember where you were is you stumble, and particularly as we age, and our working memory isn't quite as sharp as it used to be, and so it could take a little longer to get to pull that up. And if you know that your working memory is already a little challenged, it could take even longer. Um, Sam, it doesn't usually bother me unless I'm talking about something very important or intimate per se, and they go off topic from that. Okay. Andrew, I don't have good timing, and I have friends help by tapping my hand to let me know. Andrew, I'm so glad you said this because that is actually something else I'm going to recommend. Do you have a friend or a family member when you're out with them who can give you a signal that, maybe you're over talking or you sort of have gone off track? Um, so let's see, Brian, it doesn't bother me sometimes. I feel more connected when someone does this. Oh, that's interesting. I'd like to know why, Brian. Or is it Jessica? I'm not sure it says Brian Jessica Blair, so I'm not sure who you are, but whoever you are, please, share why you feel more connected. Cynthia, other people never finish talking. It's true. One of my favorite, if you don't live in the United States, but maybe you've heard of this television show called Seinfeld with, Jerry Seinfeld, who's a very famous comedian. And there's a classic episode where, he talks about the way people talk, and there are long talkers, and there are loud talkers, and there are soft talkers, and so in my house we do joke about someone being a long talker or a very loud talker. It's just you want them to get to the point. Fabiola, I feel like my words don't matter and what I'm saying is stupid. That's not true, Fabiola. That's not true. It's just a feeling. It's hard when your own mother does it, not intentional, but it's hard. Yes, it is. It pokes at core wounds when I'm being interrupted or invalidated. Therapy has helped the negative spiral that comes with those feelings. I'm glad, Cassandra. Pam, I worry I'll forget what I have to say, and that is why I interrupt. Very, very common. I find myself frequently interrupted while other people complain about being interrupted by me. That's tough. ADHD, 2 to 3 ADHDers are terrible. In one conversation. Yeah, you got to brace yourself for that. I do not think first I'm just interrupting. It's becoming a habit. I'm one of those who may forget a relevant a comment. Being late means their time is more important than mine. I see. So for you, Mark, what I understand is that being interrupted is less offensive than people being late because what they're showing you is that your time doesn't matter as much as theirs. Got it. Terry, in my family of 9, we all spoke at once. No one else likes this. Amanda, when I did my first year of learning counseling, counseling helped me understand how to park my thoughts as a visual learner. Ooh, that's cool. Diana, I don't like to get interrupted, but I'm often not aware. When I interrupt someone, I just speak before I forget what I want to say. So I'm hearing this theme a lot. I'm worried I'm going to forget what I want to say, so I interrupt people so I don't forget it. I'm wondering if you ever interrupt people because you're bored. Um, Sometimes I feel like, particularly with long talkers, it's like, okay, I got where you're going. I'm ready for something else. And so I'll interrupt. And then I feel not great about doing that because, when you interrupt, it can be hurtful to the other person on the one hand. On the other hand, it's not your job to sit through a 10-minute monologue. So that's an interesting thing to think about. Like, how do we navigate, when has it been a long enough time when someone's talking that it's okay to interrupt? I'm curious what you all think about that. And then when you try to explain to someone why you did it, you can own it, but they're still mad. And then that cues RSD. I think that's true, Rachel. Is this crazy? Would it be nuts of me to keep a notebook and write down what I want to say instead of jumping in? No. In fact, that's going to be one of my recommendations later. You can also use it on your phone as long as you let people know. Sometimes I interrupt. I'm trying not to do that. So I might write down some notes for myself because I forget things. And then they understand why you're doing. what you're doing. Cassandra, I had to learn a long time ago to stop worrying about what others think about my parenting of my neurodivergent kids. Here, here. They don't know our struggles. They're only seeing a snapshot of our life. If they judge me by that, it's not my responsibility. I agree, 150,000%. Let's see. Um, let's see. Thank you, Annie, for posting that. Um, my daughter has ASD. If you interrupt her, she has to start from the beginning, and her stories are long. Yeah, so she probably needs a signal of when she might be trailing off a little bit too much. Tina, when my brain isn't calm and I'm worked up, I literally can't control it when communicating. And sometimes you say you can't talk later. And with ADHD, holding back thoughts and talk feels like an inner explosion, holding it in my head. It's as hard as holding your trip to the bathroom. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really, really important. And I appreciate that you share that you're saying that, because I do think that it takes a lot of concentration for many people with ADHD to hold on to their thought, and then you're not listening and you're not present, and so you've sort of left the conversation, which is why I want to go back to taking a note. Um, um, and why you kind of have to calm your brain so you're not so worked up, because if you're really feeling passionate or agitated about a topic, maybe politics or something, um, it's going to get harder and harder for you to manage yourself. Joni, I love this. I think better when I write my thoughts down on paper. I really need to take your advice. Thank you, Michelle. Oh yes, close talkers. Yes, thank you, Cassandra. Close talkers. That's my mom and my brother. My brother monologues, never lets me get a word in. It's Jessica, and I think it's because then I know they have ADD like me, and then I don't feel self-conscious. That's right. It can be easier having a conversation with other people who have ADHD or understand ADHD, because then you don't feel judged. Michelle, I was 53 when I was diagnosed. I'm worried that interrupting is as much a habit as it is ADHD related. It might be, and that's something that you can work on. I hear you, Jason. Rachel. Susan, my brain is 5 steps ahead and I see the bigger solution, the forest, while others are still analyzing the details of the problem, the trees. Right. And that can be very frustrating, because you're like, okay, let's just get to the forest already. Enough with the trees. And people are still working on the details of the trees. I hear that. Jason, people take forever to say what they have to say, and most and are mostly boring to begin with. I've learned to be much more patient with Mormons and value them for who they are and how they communicate. Well, thank you for sharing that. Michelle, when it's a long talker, I actually use interruption to redirect into something mutually interesting. Mark, I always want people to get to the point. I hear you on that, Mark. Um, Terry, yep, my family, fast and furious. Jody, not really interested in what people talk about, makes me feel like a bad person. I'm just stuck in what I want to talk about. I have 3 neurodiverse children as well. I think that you have things that you're interested in, and they don't have to be things other people are interested in. And that doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you different. I have these interests. I don't have these interests. If someone comes to me and starts to talk to me about professional hockey, I'm not super interested in that. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have a hard time sticking with that conversation. In those moments, I'll look out the window. I might look at my fingernails to see how they're doing. I'll I'll go off on a tangent in my head about what I would like to talk about. It's hard. It's hard sometimes. And when you're in a group of people and a bunch of people want to talk about this thing, like, and you don't, you're left sort of on your own. Let's see. I'm of a long-winded talker and get sidetracked with multiple thoughts at once and bounce around a lot. Okay. We all do that. Virginia says me too. Robert, I had a sister who got very angry when I would interrupt her, and I have to be careful, but she would never stop yammering or give me a chance to respond to her talk, particularly on edgy topics or worse. So this goes into this sort of conundrum in conversations, which is, when is someone really taking up too much airspace, and how do you let them know, politely, that you have something you'd like to add to the conversation? And I feel like in those situations, uh, what you can do is you can say something like, "Excuse me, um, I think I'd like to add something here. Could you pause for a minute? There's something, I really would like to say." And then that's a kind of respectful and kind way of letting them know, "Dude, you're dominating the conversation," or "Hey, take a break. There are other people here who want to say something." So you do it kindly, you do it calmly, and you do it um, thoughtfully. So, many people with ADHD, of course, go on tangents, and people without the ADHD, when they're telling a story or sharing what's on their mind. Um, this is an understandable part of having many ideas simultaneously. One of my clients recited aloud for me what he was thinking, and it was a nonstop train of observations, interpretations, ideas, and curiosity. He's 15. And he said, my brain is going all the time. This was actually, he had wanted to go on medication to try medication again. He had not been successful with it when he was younger, but he really wanted to try it again. And so I said, well, let's pretend that you're just speaking out loud. What's in your brain? I'd like to hear it. And it was really nonstop. And I could see how frustrating it was for him because he's like, I want to be able to do my math. I want to focus on my math, but I have all of these other things going all the time and they're distracting me. And that can happen, of course, in the course of conversations as well. How many of you have a brain that does that too? That these many ideas can often lead to sidetracking in conversations. You go off the main subject and you may not realize that you're too far down a road that really isn't going anywhere until someone tells you, or people start looking away, or they turn away, or they confront you directly, sometimes not so nicely. And so, in these moments, often kids and adults with ADHD become defensive, feeling angry and ashamed at the same time. And these feelings can make things worse for you socially and contribute to exclusion or humiliation. So let's look at some strategies for reducing interruptions. First of all, write things down. So I agree with Michelle that, use your phone or carry around a small little binder or pad of paper that you can jot down a few keywords that will cue you to recall what it is you wanted to say. Whether you're in a meeting or you're hanging out with friends, let other folks know that you don't want to interrupt and you're working on this and you're taking some notes while people are talking to help you remember your thoughts better and not interrupt. And this will prepare them in case you do choose to write something down, and it wards off any judgment from them. Secondly, be candid. If you don't want to write things down, say, I have something to share, but I don't want to interrupt you. I'm just afraid I will forget it. This warns people of why you are interrupting and it explains it in some way. And you can even say, with my ADHD, it's hard for me to recall things after, you know, a certain amount of time. Um, you will have to monitor, though, how many times you do this. More than a few times in a conversation, when you say I have something to share, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm afraid I'm going to forget it, it is going to get tiring for the people with other people in the conversation. So that might be that might be too much. But here's the other thing: if you happen to forget something, do you need to worry about it? I mean, can't it can it come back to you later, which it very well may, and then you can text whatever you wanted to say at the time to the people you were with. Like, hey, I was thinking about this conversation and I forgot something that I wanted to share. Here it is. Watch out for overwhelm. Indoor parties, gatherings at a beach or a park, or eating dinner at a busy restaurant. All of these environments can be extra distracting. Why? Because there's a lot of ambient noise and there's a lot of activity in the environment. So it could be harder for you to track what's being said, by whom, and staying in the conversation. If you can't hear or focus on what someone is telling you, ask if you're in a small little group like two people, or if you guys can step away, move somewhere else away from the noise for a few moments because you really want to hear what they have to say. And it's so loud in the in the disco that you can't possibly do that. Finally, listen and ask questions. People like to talk about themselves and they also like to feel heard. So use reflective listening techniques in a conversation. I heard you say X. Tell me more about that. Or that sounds interesting. Can you describe or explain it further? Use wait. Why am I talking now? Okay, wait now. Periodically ask yourself, why am I talking? Like if you notice that you're kind of rambling, stop. If you notice that people are giving you nonverbal signals, change what you're doing. Remember that a pause in a sentence doesn't mean that the person is finished speaking. They could just be pausing or breathing or having some water. So if you're not sure if they're finished speaking, ask or wait 10 seconds and then ask. Okay, so let's look. There are so many comments. Wow, I'm sure I've missed so many of them. Jody, I've isolated myself because people notice I talk louder, literally, and just say everything I think and feel to anyone, and then afterwards feel ashamed and think, why did I say all those things? So you are oversharing. This is something that many people with ADHD do. I do it a little bit when I'm nervous or I'm in a situation like and I just am feeling a little awkward. I might overshare and then I'm mad at myself afterwards. So I understand doing that. I think being aware that you might talk loudly is something that you can actually just change all the time. Like you could just try to turn it down a notch so that other people can see that you're paying attention to some of the feedback they've given you about talking a little less loudly. Some people don't hear the volume of themselves talking. You may want to have your hearing checked, or or uh, or just have a signal from a friend who's in the conversation. Michelle says, "I have a friend who handles." Oh, Michelle, can you post that again because it disappeared? There are so many comments here. There are about 67 comments, so I'm not going to be able to get to all these comments today, and I'm so sorry because the Facebook magician is just wiping them off my screen before I can get to them. I'm very sorry. Um, Tanya, I feel like such a weirdo when I see connections way up ahead, but people have no idea what I'm talking about. Right, so your brain's moving pretty fast and you're jumping ahead. So what I think would help to just slow it down a little bit and just link wherever people are to the next thing or the thing that's in your head because they're not making those connections. Andrew uses notes on your phone. Good for you, Andrew. Jody, I went on a Zoom meeting. A lady noticed my ADHD right straight away. That sounds like that wasn't so, was that positive or was that not so positive? Um, Megan, my coworkers know when I'm not on Adderall because they have no idea what I'm talking about. Because I can go from discussing my dog to a pair of shoes I saw to wanting to change the color of my hair in 3 minutes. Well, it's great that your coworkers know that and that you know that about yourself. That's really helpful. And maybe some self-awareness around I'm only going to talk about my dog and then get like pause and not go to the other three subjects might be a good practice. Lori, people say it's like I'm speaking a stream of consciousness and feel the need to add a gazillion details despite knowing the listener, it's not the listener's need to hear. Well, this is also good feedback. I mean, some of the things that we want to do when we get some of this information from other people is to and take it in and think, how can I use this to make a shift? So if you feel like you're speaking a stream of consciousness and add a lot of details, maybe try to add one detail about something that you're saying instead of, four or five. Be conscious of the details. That might be the only thing that you do for a while as an effort to make a change. Lori said, okay, that's right. Sorry, Lori. Um, how many times, so many times I interrupt to show that I relate to what they're talking about. Right. And how else can you show that you relate? You can nod your head. You can, do a thumbs up. Uh, you know, you can have a signal like, you can say, yeah, and, without necessarily interrupting. Um, Mark, I'm very overwhelmed by loud noise, drives me crazy. So it's good to understand what things overwhelm you because that will trigger a whole cortisol adrenaline response in your body and your brain so that the anxiety will actually make it harder for you to participate in a conversation in the way you'd like to, thoughtfully, respectfully, calmly, things like that. Um, Virginia, I realize that it can make it seem like I'm competing or trying to one up them, but I'm just trying to connect. Right. So that's interesting. And I think that one of the things that we want to say when we're trying to connect with people instead of, oh yeah, that happens to me too, um, which can feel like on the one hand, it's like you're not, we were trying to communicate, you're not alone. But if you go into all the ways that that happens to you, it could diminish them feeling like what they're saying is important. So it might be nice just to say, I really hear what you're saying. I get it. That happens to me also. And not go into so much about how it happens to you and why it happens to you, but just to acknowledge, I hear you. That happens to me too. Cassandra's offering some earplugs. Yes, you can watch this video later. Mark, I'm in pharma sales, so asking questions comes naturally. Terrific. Sometimes loud noise makes me angry. Is there a trick to know when you can interject in a group convo? Okay, so that's a really great question. So let's think about that. How do you know when you can join into a conversation? Usually there are some signals from the people around you that other people you can basically observe behavior. So I've actually created a bunch of strategies for how to participate in conversations, and the one of the first strategies is to pause and observe before you enter a room or a conversation. Get a sense of what's going on um, instead of jumping in. So you can sort of get a sense of how people are talking to each other, what the pace of the interaction is, what the volume of the interaction is, and then you can sort of figure out where to sort of step in, and that might be adding, yeah, I hear you, that happens to me, sort of an agreement, sort of a kind of an interjection, or a question asking for more information. All of those things would be helpful. um, okay, Michelle, I do keep track of what people are saying sometimes so my mind doesn't wander off and I stop listening. My husband says I interrupt him, but then sometimes he wonders why I wasn't listening to him. Heather's 10 seconds in my mind is a long time compared to others. Okay, so maybe 10 seconds is too long. Maybe it's just 5 seconds. Maybe it's a quick pause. Um, or we can wait a few seconds, maybe let's say five, and then you can ask a question. Because you're right, 10 is kind of long. It can be hard to verbalize what I'm thinking. It creates anxiety for me. Colleen, a lot of people with ADHD struggle with how to express their thoughts verbally, both in conversation and in writing. And I can see why that would be anxiety provoking. Samira, I notice from their body language if they are bored from me when I talk a lot. Yes. So, what kinds of body language are you talking about? So, one thing that we want to think about is, in terms of strategies for participating in conversations with ADHD, watching body language and facial expressions. Interest and engagement look open and calm. There's a relaxed posture. There's some eye contact. People are leaning forward. Judgment and discomfort, boredom look much more closed. Crossed arms and legs, looking away, checking your phone, etc. There's also, physical proximity. In my culture here in the United States, it's about 3 feet, an arm's length. If you're closer than that, you're probably in somebody's bubble. And many people are not comfortable with that. Keeping your hands and your body parts to yourself without asking permission. Like in some cultures, it's really natural to, touch people when you're talking to them. Some cultures we want to ask, can I, is it okay if I reach out, when I'm talking and touch you, because it could offend someone. And then we want to notice volume. How are people speaking? Are you speaking louder or quieter than the people around you? Can you hear yourself? Do you have a buddy who can signal you if you're off? What is your tone of voice? Um, let's see. Virginia, for the past 5 years or so, I've been trying to improve on my active listening skills. Good for you. That includes asking more questions and trying to wait for answers and not just trying to finish the other person's thoughts. That is fantastic. I love that because waiting for answers is part of what a conversation is. You ask a question and then you wait for the answer. You don't go and ask the next question. Fabiola, I have a hard time getting my thoughts together and feel so inadequate expressing myself. I'm sorry to hear that, Fabiola. I'm wondering if you put a lot of pressure on yourself to say or do the right thing, and maybe expressing your thoughts in smaller chunks or smaller thoughts, so to speak, might be a way to practice the skill of expressing yourself and feeling more confident and pleased with what you're saying. Emma, I don't even realize I interrupt, and then I feel paranoid that I'm annoying people. Okay, so let's break this down for a minute, Evan. Emma, excuse me. You don't realize that you're interrupting, and then you're feeling paranoid that you're annoying people. Okay, so you're not responsible for somebody else's reaction to what you do. Their reaction is theirs. What you're responsible for is how you manage yourself. So if you're not aware that you're interrupting, maybe that's something that you want to work on, which is noticing when you're interrupting and focusing on that as a skill rather than on the sort of paranoid, what's wrong with me, blah, blah, blah story that you're telling yourself, because that isn't going to lead to change. But the first one is. Um, Okay. Sarah, I often dig into my own hand to prevent myself from interrupting. Ooh, how about a fidget? How about carrying around some fidgets? Maybe a rubber band or a stone in your pocket or something instead of that. Um, sorry, I forgot to add that improving visual thoughts. Okay, got it. Deborah, I cut people off when they are telling me a long story and I want to get to the point. Okay, so how do we deal with when people are long talkers? I think when someone's a long talker, and they've gone on for several minutes, which probably feels like 17 hours, to you, perhaps sometimes, what we want to be able to say is, okay, excuse me. This seems like this is a long story. Is there any way that you could consolidate it. I have some attention issues and I really want to hear the story, but that's one way to go. I know that sometimes with my husband, I love him dearly and he is a bit of a long talker, and I'll look at him, he'll be talking and I'll look at him and he'll say, "You want me to get to the point?" And I'm like, "Mm-hmm." So, we might try to come up with some sort of signal like, okay, you've now been talking for about 7 or 8 minutes and I've listened to a good part of your story, but I need a pause because A, I'm overwhelmed, and B, it doesn't feel like I'm actually here. Sometimes when people are telling a long story, they basically feels like they could be talking into the mirror, like you're not even present. And so in those moments, what we want to try to do as gracefully as we can and say is to interject and say, this is a really interesting story. Let me ask you a question. And then ask a question that leads to resolution rather than more detail about what they were saying. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle, it went away again. Oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. Yes, Nadine, you can. Um, in writing, I'm great. I can edit myself. In real life, I'm seriously socially awkward. Right. So what happens is in writing is you have all the time you need to play with your words and how they're going to sound and how you're going to arrange them. In conversation, we don't have that. And so we want to be able to do is to be able to, buy ourselves some time, say a part of something you want to say, but maybe not the whole thing, because you're not sure that you're gonna get it out the way you want, or ask for some patience on the side of the people who are listening and say, I have something I want to say. I'm not sure it's going to make much sense, but if you could give me, a little bit to explain, I think I'm going to make my point. or maybe they'll help you with it. Um, let's see. I'm very detail oriented. How do I filter out the unnecessary? Well, that's a great question because in conversation, when people tell a story, you could be very focused on the little details of the when and the where and not actually seeing the forest of the general what. And so I think it might be good practice for you to have some conversations with some close buds or a partner and really, actually just try to focus on the bigger picture and not the details, and go back and forth in the conversation, getting some feedback about how you're doing that. Margaret, oh boy, when some people talk slow, so hard. I feel you. um I don't know body language, so would it be worth taking a course in this? Rachel, I don't know if you need to take a course in it. I think there's probably a couple YouTube videos that would be helpful in, understanding body language and how to read it. Um, that might be useful. Steve says, my wife loves to finish off my conversation sentences. Oh, that's really annoying. Sometimes I do that, really. And it drives my children and my friends or my husband, and mostly my husband, crazy. So I'm trying, instead of finishing the sentence, to be able to say, um, hey, can we pause for a minute? I have a question, or I'm wondering if you could sort of move through some of the details and get to the gestalt of the story. um, I do this to my partner totally unintentionally. Agree, learning body language would be a good tool. Cassandra, I cannot handle people being in my bubble. Yeah, that 3 feet. And I'm very sensitive to touch, so I'm not a hugger by nature. I have to remind myself that my children need affection so they can get the touch they need. It's hard. I imagine that would be hard, Cassandra, and good for you for going beyond your comfort zone to doing something that you know is good for your kids, even though it is a little hard for you. Margaret, I am told I raise my voice if I get enthusiastic and I'm mistaken for arguing. If someone is mistaking you for being argumentative, then I think, what they can say is, "Hey, why are you yelling at me?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just so enthusiastic or passionate about this. I naturally kind of rev it up. I'm not arguing at all." Just own it and move on. Don't go into the shame. There's nothing shameful about it. You're just activated and excited. Michelle, I'm writing all this stuff now, which means that I'm interrupting you with my own reactions. That's okay because you can rewatch it anytime you want, Michelle. All right, so let's go into some of the strategies. So we talked about body language, physical proximity, and volume. Also, we want to think about finding alternatives to eye contact. If you or your child, for example, is uncomfortable with direct eye contact, perhaps engage in conversations during a distraction activity so people aren't looking right at you and you're not looking at them. Walking, driving, chores, shopping. There are other ways to connect with people, kayaking, um, than looking at them face to face. If you can, and if you find that you get very distracted during conversations, can you watch someone's mouth or their hand gestures as they speak to improve your focus, or does that make it even harder? This is something you want to ask yourself. In conversations, you want to ask open-ended questions that begin with how and what more than why, and you want to make a plan for when you get distracted, okay, or you space out, because this will naturally happen to you. And if it does naturally happen to you, what are you going to do in that moment? How are you going to get back into the conversation? Okay. What, how can you enter what's happening? And I'm going to be actually, I'm actually looking right now. I'm interrupting myself because I have a downloadable for you on social anxiety that I think is relevant for many of you. So I'm putting that in the chat so you can check that out, and I'll put it in again because I can't see where it went because I don't know if it got there. Okay, so when you space out or you're distracted, Just like we teach kids, what's your plan for coming back when you've been looking out the window and you've missed something in class? We want to have a plan for ourselves in conversations. How are we going to get back in the conversation? Is there anyone who I'm hanging out with right now who could assist me? Could I lean over and say, I spaced it, or I got distracted. What are we talking about? Because if what you do is say, hey, you come down, you kind of drift off, and then you come back, and you're like, what's going on? What you're going to feel is like, people are going to feel like, what are you doing? You're interrupting, and you don't know what we're talking about. It's not a great, um, it's not a great thing for you in terms of your social capital, and it's not a great thing for them either, because they feel like you weren't listening when you probably weren't, because you spaced out, but it's not on purpose. So you want to, as I said, you want to pause and observe before you enter a room or a conversation, get a sense of what's going on before instead of jumping in and asking, hey, what's going on? Or what are you talking about? Um, or interrupting to say something. Just join, wait, a few minutes, take the temperature of what's going on around you, and then ease your way in. Ask a friend or family member to help you with interrupting. Maybe collaborate on a signal that communicates if you've wandered too far off topic or if you've been talking long. And finally, it's okay to feel awkward in conversations. Many of us do, and whether we have ADHD or not. That's part of relationships and relating to people. But you don't have to judge yourself for it. You don't have to put yourself down and run a whole narrative about what's wrong with you because you feel awkward or uncomfortable. Everybody has insecurities, whether or not they show them. You may wear your emotions on your sleeve. I do. You can tell when I'm upset. I'm not very good at hiding it. I never have been. And when I see people who are much better at internalizing things, I'm always amazed. I'm like, how do they do that? I can be mad at myself for that, or what I've chosen to do is to actually own it and say, like, you know what? I am a passionate, emotional person, and that's part of what makes me tick. And it makes me fun and warm and loving. And sometimes I'm a little too much, and I'm working on it. So I want to encourage you to have a statement like that for yourself. What can you say about yourself? Sometimes I drift off. I miss what's happening in a conversation. I'm not a bad person. I can't always control it. I need a strategy for when I come back. Sometimes I need to take notes to just jot down a few words about what I'm thinking so I don't interrupt. And it helps me track the conversation. I need to let people know that I do that so they don't feel like I'm texting instead of participating, right? So own it and be honest about it. Talk about it, and instead of feeling ashamed, work on changing one skill. Conversation, being able to have a conversation, to participate in a conversation, to read the room, to understand body language, all of these are different skill sets. And you can't really change multiple skill sets at one time. You can change one thing at a time. So pick one thing about conversations. Maybe it's interrupting or sidetracking or how you interrupt or how you join a conversation, whatever it is that you would like to work on. And I'd like you to throw that in the chat right now. What is something you'd like to work on now that you've participated in this Facebook Live? Um, Megan says, I've actually learned to love the positive qualities that my severe ADHD has given me, even though I'm frustrated by the challenges it brings to my life also. That's great. What else? What is something that you use one skill with conversations that you'd like to work on as we close today? Because we're going to close in a couple minutes. Something that I've talked about, something that other people have shared. What's a takeaway for you? Cassandra, I have misophonia also. I have to leave the room when people are eating, and there isn't anything to drown out the noise of their eating. That's really good to know about yourself. Tracy, something you want to work on is talking too much. Thank you. Anybody else? Um, what is something that you would like to take with you? Tiffany, I need to share less detail around talking. Okay. Thank you. Isabel, taking notes during conversations or calls, also going to work on oversharing. Michelle, I want to tell people I both interrupt and overshare without being seriously weird. Got it. Tanya, I'm going to write stuff down. Tina, not oversharing. Isabel, I never know what is too much and what is okay. Um, Terry, number one, patience with slow talkers, talking out loud, responding more calmly to when my family tells me I'm getting too close to folks or I'm interrupting or too excitable. So you're getting feedback and you're not going to be defensive. You're going to take it in calmly, accepting that I share too much, talking too much and interrupting, sidetracking the conversation. So I'm getting a lot of people who say about talking too much. So what you want to do is really ask yourself, why am I talking now? And look for signs from people that you might be oversharing or over talking. And some of those signs can be simple as their eyes darting away, their head looking in another direction, checking their watch, maybe fidgeting, like adjusting their pants or fixing their dress or something like that. So we want to really try to pay attention to that. Tina says getting straight to the point. Colleen, when I get overwhelmed, I can just go mute. Help. Okay, Colleen, when you're overwhelmed, we don't want you to go mute. What we want you to be able to say is, I'm overwhelmed. I need to take a break. I'll be back. And then go to the bathroom and reorganize yourself, slow it down, get the breather that you need, or step outside and come back. Um, Virginia, I'd like to work on providing less details when speaking with someone, especially if I've interrupted them. Thank you. Margaret, my 13-year-old too. Gum pops, pulling air through my teeth, singing, all sorts of things. It's really annoying. Don't know what to do about it. One thing at a time, awareness of one thing at a time. And working on taking notes rather than interrupting. A little notebook is great. Fabiola, taking notes and using cue words to remember what I want to say. Great. Tanya, going to work on relaxing into the conversation and be kinder to myself. I love that. High five. Oversharing and interrupting. Asking more questions. Good job, Andrew. Amanda, I struggle with accurately saying what I mean. I don't always know how to say something. People take it the wrong way. I think, Amanda, in those situations, what you want to do is to say, sometimes it's hard for me to explain this, so let me know if I'm not making sense or something like that to people, so that you're opening the door for people to say, well, wait, hold on, I'm not sure where you're going here, and then you can kind of circle back. I interrupt conversations because I won't remember what I was going to say. Writing down my thought is wonderful. I'm going to ask for subtle signals from my husband or kids when I'm interrupting or all over the place when I talk. That's great. This happened yesterday, but I laughed and said, wow, I just overshared, and we all laughed. That's great. Having the patience to limit my sharing during other conversations. Have no patience when the conversation is depressing and I can't get away from it. If the conversation is not working for you and you can't get away from it, then it is okay to focus on something else in the room. As I shared earlier if you're going to talk to me about ice hockey, the ice hockey playoffs, I'm not going to be interested in that conversation. So I will look around the room. Maybe there's a really pretty plant or a nice painting, and I'll focus on that. With one ear kind of listening to when the conversation might change. Oversharing, Virginia. At least you know you have it and you're not blaming those around you. That's right, Cynthia. That's very right to say to Cassandra. Embrace the awkwardness. Need to learn to finish my sentences. Great. You can start a sentence and then like interrupt yourself. And I think that's very hard for other people in conversations to just sort of slow down, say the thing that you want to say, and then get to the next thing. And if you don't get to the next thing, oh well. I notice that I do that. I interrupt myself, particularly if I'm feeling anxious. I'll like say half a sentence and then I'll say the next sentence and the next sentence. And my husband will say, could you just finish your first sentence? I need to focus my own talk on one topic and delete superfluous details, limit important details. Thank you. LOL, checking a watch and they don't have a watch. Exactly. Studying body language, learning how to recognize cues and being upfront and not shaming myself. Way to go, Rachel. or Rochelle. I think it's Rochelle, sorry. That's great. Establish hand gestures with my family to signal talking too long or that we want to interrupt. Right now, we're pretty rude to each other. That's great. You're going to try to, change and shift the family conversation and dynamic. Megan, I'm a huge oversharer. Yeah, even sometimes think about it for a second and then my impulse goes, I just go for it. Sometimes I regret it. Okay, so let's start small. So let's maybe say a little less in a conversation and see how you feel. Um, Sandra, actually, I think my biggest struggle is the need to get all the details in rather than just the pertinent information. The extra details derail me, and I sometimes never get there. So that's really, really important self-awareness, Sandra, to actually focus on the pertinent information, in particularly if you know what it is. And you can catch yourself kind of going off on a tangent. Let's see. Oh, there are so many comments, and we've already run over. I'm going to do 3 more minutes, and we'll stop. Katie, same here. I get sidetracked so easily and hijack my own conversations. Megan, taking notes doesn't really work because I'm a hairstylist. That's true. You can't write while you're cutting somebody's hair. So in combos with my conversations, I have to be more aware of body language. Right. Fortunately, most of my clients and I have discussed my ADHD, and they just laugh with me about it. That's great, Megan. And I think having a sense of humor is so important when we're talking about living fully with ADHD. Um, Calming down by taking relaxation breaths to slow my mind. I'm always a big fan of relaxation breaths and calming down, whether you're doing alternate nostril breathing or just breathing into your belly with your hand on it, or maybe breathing in for 4, holding for 4, breathing out for 6, pausing on empty for 2, and doing that a few times. All of those things can help you slow down so you can be more present. Lauren, giving myself a break from trying to self-improve all the time. That's exhausting, so I hear that. You're welcome, Susan. This group needs a talking stick. Yeah, that would be so cool to do internationally. I have a social, let's see, knitting group with many ASPE ADHD members. I call us the no social skills group, but we try to be kind about it. Thanks for sharing that. I love that. Self-awareness you want to work on. You're welcome for the chat. Yes, Fabiola, it is a relief to be with others who really understand. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your stories. I'm so glad you were here today, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend with some good interpersonal connections and feeling like you can say what you mean and you mean what you say. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you soon. Bye.